Good morning, everyone. अच्छा, now in our last class हमने कहाँ तक पहुंचे थे? Arab conquest of Sindh कवर कर लिया था. We had talked about the impact of the Arab conquest of Sindh. Moving forward, we had to look at the Turkish invasions of North India. Right? When did these invasions occur? They occurred in two phases. First phase कब? Late 10th and early 11th century. And second phase कब? Late 12th century. ठीक है? Second thing that we need to address is who were the Turks and where were they invading India from? कौन थे Turks? हाँ, so they were a group of Central Asian tribes with a common linguistic and cultural heritage. Now the earliest Turks were from which part of the world? The Eurasian steppe grasslands. ठीक है? So they were a group of steppe people, steppe tribal groups थे. And steppe grasslands में what is the chief occupation of the people? Pastoralism. ठीक है? So they were pastoralist, nomadic tribes. Now this part of the world has churned out great empires over the millenniums, right? For example, no, they have created many great empires of the world. For example, हमने अपनी हिस्ट्री में भी देखा है, the Kushan Yuchi Empire, the Hunnic Empire, the Scythian Empire, the Turkic Empire, the Mongol Empire, right? Or there is a certain pattern to the historical development of this region. होता क्या है that the steppe grassland which spreads all the way from Manchuria in the east. Manchuria कहाँ है पता है ना? ईस्ट नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न चाइना वाला जो पोर्शन है वो मंचूरिया बोलते हैं उसको. ठीक है? वहां से लेकर हंगरी के प्लेन्स तक देयर इज एन अनइंटरप्टेड सी ऑफ ग्रास, राइट? तो वहां पे कई सारे ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स अलग अलग जियोग्राफीज को ऑक्यूपाई करते हैं, राइट? नाउ जनरली the thing that happens is that the civilized people living on their fringes, when they are strong, they pressurize them, they push them back, because these people always represent a security threat. ठीक है? And यहाँ पे इस पूरे region के fringes में what is the strongest civilization? The Chinese civilization, right? So whenever the Chinese civilization is strong, it pushes people away from its frontiers, and this starts a chain reaction. From the east towards the west, these groups start migrating, right? And the groups located to the furthest of the, or to the westernmost, or in Central Asia, they have nowhere else to go. They have to leave the steppe grasslands. ठीक है? अच्छा. What is that thing? What is that factor which has made all the steppe people such fierce warriors? What is that expertise? What is that ability which makes them so fierce? Which makes them so feared? Not guerrilla warfare. Organized horse riding cavalry power. ठीक है? So the people of the Eurasian steppe need the horse for their survival. ठीक है? Because as I said that this is a veritable sea of grass, and over here the horse was like the modern day tank. You could not survive without it. You could not defend without it. You could not conquer without it. And whoever had a superiority of horse riding skills, whoever had large numbers, they would always emerge victorious. Okay? The Turks had all these factors working for them. However, as they were pushed out of the steppe grasslands, they had no option but to migrate to other regions, right? So western fringes of the steppe में कौन-कौन से regions आते हैं? Western fringes में क्या-क्या आएगा? Central Asia, West Asia, yes. Russia and Eastern Europe. So from the 8th to the 9th centuries, the Turkic groups were pushed out of the steppe grasslands into these regions, and as they migrated from the steppe grasslands into Central Asia and West Asia, they came into contact with an expanding power. Which power was this? इस period में यहाँ पे what was the preeminent power? The Islamic Caliphate. ठीक है? And what was the result of their initial contact with the Islamic Caliphate? What was the reaction of the Caliphate towards these people, towards these nomadic herders? पहले थोड़ा बहुत hostility हुआ, then the Islamic governors recognized the true potential of the power that this group represented. ठीक है? They were an expanding power and they needed the services of skilled, well unified, homogeneous group of horse riders, right? So they were incorporated into the Caliphate's armies. Now there were already some similarities between the religious beliefs of the Turkic people and the Muslims, and that is why conversion to Islam was a logical conclusion. Most Turks accepted Islam voluntarily. ठीक है? अच्छा. So there was conversion to Islam and entering of the Turks into military service for the Caliphate. The Turks became soldiers and commanders Many of the Turks, instead of joining the regular caliphate army, also served them in the capacity of mercenary soldiers. ठीक है, तो soldiers for hire की तरह भी ये उनके लिए काम करने लग गए. अच्छा. At the same time, the Islamic Caliphate was also undergoing a transformation. Caliphate का birthplace क्या था? Which part of the world? Arabia, right? West Asia में, specifically Saudi Arabia. The Caliphate in its early ages had a strong Arab identity. However, with the passage of time, especially after the Islamic conquest of Iran during the late 7th century and early 8th century, Persian elements became more and more dominant within the Caliphate. Persia had a long history of creating very long-lived empires. तो उनके पास क्या था? Administrative experience था. ठीक है? So a number of Persian administrators entered the power structure within the Caliphate and they started transforming it from within. ठीक है? So Islamic Caliphate was also becoming Persianized, and it was this Persianized Caliphate that had come into contact with the Turks. So as they converted to Islam, joined the ranks of the Caliphate's armies, the Turks also became Persianized. ठीक है? अब Persianization का significance क्या है? Persianization brings standardized administration, tax centralization, and veneration of the ruler almost like a god. Okay? So absolute despotism. Now when Islam had initially been introduced, it had been a popular movement for popular freedom. Okay? It had been a movement for justice. It had been democratic in nature. After Islamic Caliphate became Persianized, did it retain all those early characteristics या फिर complete transformation हो चुका था? There was a complete transformation. The state which was the Caliphate now started representing a machinery of state centralization. The governors, administrators and rulers became increasingly power hungry. Force became the main medium for expansion. While earlier, while there was use of force, there was also non-violent persuasion to convince people to join the Caliphate, to convert to Islam. अब वो सब चला जाएगा. Now, the Caliphate was transformed into a machinery for maximization of power, wealth and force. और इस तरह के कंपटीशन में कौन लीड करेगा? Ideologues or military leaders? Military leaders are going to have the edge in this sort of confrontation, competition. And अब military leaders कौन emerge होंगे? The Turks. So the Turks thus started rising quickly to positions of power within the कैलिफेट। ठीक है, बाय द 10th century the caliphate was a gigantic state, ठीक है, stretching right from Western Europe, Spain, all the way up to Sindh in the east, right? Where was the seat of central authority in the caliphate? बगदाद। ठीक है, तो खलीफा बगदाद में होता था उस समय। Was it practically possible for a pre-modern ruler to govern effectively such a vast empire? नहीं। Therefore, decentralization was a sine qua non, right? So it was expected that the local governors are going to exercise a great degree of discretionary authority. तो उसके अलावा और कोई solution था भी नहीं। ठीक है, सेकेंडली ऑलवेज रिमेंबर दिस, तो कंपटीशन अब किसके लिए हो रहा था? पावर, वेल्थ एंड फोर्स के लिए, राइट? जनरल टेंडेंसी इन दिस सिनेरियो ऑफ द लोकल गवर्नर्स इज गोइंग टू बी व्हाट? टू रिमेन लॉयल टू द सेंटर और टू ब्रेक अवे फ्रॉम द सेंटर, टू ब्रेक अवे फ्रॉम द सेंटर। सो बाय द 10th century the caliphate had started feeling internal stresses due to strong centrifugal forces। ठीक है, but it was not possible for the local governors to make a clean break from the Khalifa. And why was this? Because there was something within the Islamic faith and the Islamic political system that prevented them from doing so. Now, Islam was not simply a set of beliefs, a set of practices, a faith. It was both a religion as well as a political philosophy। ठीक है, so the Islamic people or the Muslims across the world represented, at least ideologically, not only a religious community but also a पॉलिटिकल कम्युनिटी। और पॉलिटिकल कम्युनिटी को बोलते क्या है? नेशन। ठीक है, a nation is simply a group of people with a shared political ideology who believe that they are united with shared political interests and objectives। ठीक है, and thus the Islamic community across the world was predisposed towards unity, both politically speaking as well as religiously speaking, in a communal sense। ठीक है, इस इस्लामिक कम्युनिटी, यूनिफाइड कम्युनिटी ऑफ इस्लाम है, जो नेशन ऑफ इस्लामिक पीपल है, सो कॉल्ड, दैट इज नोन एज दी उम्मा। And since the people are one, could the leaders be several or would the leader also have to be one? एक ही लीडर हो सकता है। ठीक है, and therefore the singular leader of the entire Islamic Ummah was decreed to be the caliph or khalifa. He was considered by the overwhelming majority of Muslims across the world, especially at that point of time, to be the universal religious as well as political leader, secular leader of the entire Islamic population of the world. ठीक है? And because of this institution and this Catholic setup, it was not possible for the ambitious local governors living on the fringes of the caliphate to make a clean break from the Khalifa. Okay? But the writing was on the wall for everyone कि future में होने क्या वाला है. Sooner or later, the caliphate is going to break apart. It is going to splinter away. It was in the interest of the local governors as well as the caliph to maintain at least the semblance of unity. Okay? And therefore, a new compromise was created, resulting in the emergence of the institution of सुल्तान. नाउ सुल्तान का मतलब क्या होता है? सुल्तान इज किंग. ठीक है? The word sultan is derived from the Arabic word sult, which means power. पावर दो तरह का हो सकता है, डिफैक्टो पावर एंड डी ज्यूरे पावर. राइट? सुल्तान किस तरह का रूलर होगा? डी ज्योर रूलर और डिफैक्टो रूलर? नो. यहीं पे कॉम्प्रोमाइज हुआ. ठीक है? नाउ सुल्तान हैड द मटेरियल कैपेबिलिटी टू ब्रेक अवे फ्रॉम द खलीफा. खलीफा वुड नॉट हैव बीन एबल टू स्टॉप हिम. बट प्रॉब्लम क्या होता सुल्तान के लिए? That his people might not have accepted him because he was countermanding the precepts of Islam itself. He was dividing the Islamic Ummah, which was considered from the days of the Prophet Muhammad to be a unified community, the legitimate ruler of which was the Khalifa. तो खलीफा के खिलाफ अगर कोई खड़ा होता, he would have been anti-Islamic, right? People may have rejected him. सुल्तान wanted the acceptance of his own people so that आगे जाकर के political problems ना face करनी पड़े. right? खलीफा को साफ पता था कि होने क्या वाला है आगे. right? Sooner or later some ambitious sultan is going to come forward and break away. So better would be to keep them under the umbrella of the caliphate but give them more autonomy, even complete autonomy. ठीक है? So at least in name they continue to recognize the authority of the Khalifa. They continue to regard the Khalifa as the legitimate ruler. But in their own affairs they are completely independent. They are not answerable to the Khalifa. So power over here was legitimate power. और इस लेजिटिमेट पावर को ट्रांसफर करने के लिए, रिकॉग्नाइज करने के लिए सम लीगल डॉक्यूमेंट वुड आल्सो बी रिक्वायर्ड. एंड डज emerged the concept of मंसूर. ठीक है? दिस was the letter or decree of investiture that was issued by the Khalifa to each and every sultan who applied to him to have it. ठीक है? This was a letter or an order of recognition that the Khalifa recognizes the legitimate power, legitimate authority of a particular sultan to govern his people as a deputy of the Khalifa. Okay? So this letter of investiture allowed the sultans to fashion themselves as the legitimate deputies of the caliph. Okay? So while practically speaking, the Islamic nation had become divided, in the notional sense it remained united. इतना क्लियर है? और ये डेवलपमेंट्स कब होने शुरू हुए? अराउंड दी 10th century. The two earliest Islamic sultanates to emerge were the Seljuk Sultanate of Rome in modern Turkey, Anatolia region, and the Ghaznavid Sultanate of Afghanistan. Later in the 11th century, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt also emerged. Okay? So these were the earliest sultanates to emerge across the world. In all of them, the ruling class consisted of which group? Turks, and not simple Turks but Persianized Turks. Okay? So they had adopted Islam, they had embraced the Persian philosophy of rule, of despotic authority. They had also adopted Persian customs. Persian was their official language. Persian pattern of administration was adopted across these sultanates. Why? Because they were the descendants of the Islamic Caliphate, which by the 10th century had itself become heavily Persianized. ठीक है? तो हर जगह पर the systems of administration, taxation, military mobilization, rule, projection of power, they were quite same. तो हर जहां पे सेम था, बस उसके अलग अलग मैनिफेस्टेशंस हुए अलग अलग रीजन्स में. Out of these, which do you think is the most likely to have started invading the North Indian region from the 10th century onwards? Ghaznavids, located in Afghanistan. सबसे close proximity में वही हैं, and they were the ones who started invading. Clear? Background समझ में आया है? Who the Turks were? लिख लो. Turks were a group of nomadic pastoral tribes which originated from the Eurasian steppe around the 8th century. Instead of originated, write the word emerged, which emerged from the Eurasian steppe around the 8th century. As a result of westward migration of tribal groups in the steppe during this period. Full stop. Next point likho. As the Turks arrived in Central and Western Asia, they came into contact with the expanding Islamic Caliphate. With the expanding Islamic Caliphate. Full stop. After a brief period of initial conflict, comma, the caliphate recognized their potential as expert horse riders and archers. Full stop. Next point. The vast majority of Turks were induced to convert and joined the caliphate as soldiers and mercenaries. Next point. The caliphate itself was becoming heavily Persianized. With standardized administration, revenue centralization, and despotic control. Next point. As such, the caliphate was becoming heavily militarized. Full stop. In this scenario, the Turks rose quickly to positions of immense power. Next point. At the same time, the caliphate had become too large for effective central administration, and strong centrifugal tendencies had emerged. Strong centrifugal tendencies had emerged. Full stop. अगला पॉइंट लिखो. Powerful Turkish governors naturally wanted to break away from Baghdad but feared the loss of legitimacy as a rebellion against the caliph would have represented a break from Islam. Full stop. अगला पॉइंट लिखो. Therefore, a compromise was ultimately reached. As the power of any would-be Islamic ruler was given legitimacy by the caliph himself, through the instrument of Mansur. It is a letter or decree of investiture. Subpoint. This allowed the local ruler to style himself as the Sultan and confirmed him as a deputy of the caliph. Full stop. अगला point. Next main point. With this, comma, several powerful Turkish sultanates emerged in different parts of the caliphate. These include 1, 2, 3. The Seljuk Sultanate, of Anatolia, जो एशियन पोर्शन है टर्की का, मच ऑफ दैट कंसिस्ट ऑफ अ प्लेटो. उस प्लेटो को एनाटोलियन प्लेटो कहते हैं. ठीक है, तो जो ईस्टर्न पोर्शन ऑफ टर्की है, जो एशियन पोर्शन ऑफ टर्की है, मोस्ट ऑफ दैट इज कंपोज्ड ऑफ द एनाटोलियन रीजन, एनाटोलियन पेनिनसुला. सेल्जुक सल्तनत emerged initially in this region. ठीक है, सेल्जुक सल्तनत ऑफ एनाटोलिया, गजनविद सल्तनत सेकेंड वाला in Afghanistan, and Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt. Full stop. Next point. It was the Ghaznavids who began invading North India from the late 10th century onwards. From the late 10th century onwards. Now, the earliest of the Ghaznavid rulers who invaded India कौन था? Alaptgin, followed by Subuktigin, and finally Mahmud of Ghazni. ठीक है, of these which one is the most well known? महमूद ऑफ गजनी. ठीक है, तो अब हमें देखना है कि why did this early wave of Turkish invasions occur? Why did the Turks invade India and what was the impact of this? ठीक है, किसको? अपने आर्मी में. बिकॉज देखो, ये रफली ये वाला जो रीजन है दैट इज चाइना. ठीक है, अब चाइना के बीच में इफ यू वर टू ड्रॉ एन इमेजिनरी डायगोनल लाइन, तो बता सकते हो कि यहाँ पे कितना परसेंट पॉपुलेशन रहता है इस समय और यहाँ पे कितना परसेंट पॉपुलेशन रहता है? यहाँ पे रहता है 94% ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन, यहाँ पे रहता है 6% of the population. Even though this line divides the Chinese landmass almost equally into two halves. ठीक है, अब ये वाला रीजन, ये वाला जो रीजन है stretching from here right up to here, this is the steppe grasslands. ठीक, now over the centuries the steppe grasslands have been occupied by a large combination of tribes. ठीक है, तो कोई एक ट्राइब नहीं है जो पूरे ग्रासलैंड को कंट्रोल करता है. Whenever the Chinese Empire is strong, ये यहां से लोगों को पुश करना शुरू करते हैं. This they did in the 8th century also. ठीक है, एंड एक चेन रिएक्शन स्टार्ट हुआ. तो यहाँ पे कई सारे ग्रुप्स इन्वॉल्व थे. फॉर एग्जाम्पल द किपचैक्स, कारलुक्स, Mongols and the Turks. During the 8th century, Turks already इस रीजन में थे. ठीक है, चाइना कहाँ है? इधर. टर्क्स हैं यहाँ पर, राइट? सो could the Chinese have incorporated the Turks into their armies? नहीं हो सकता था, राइट? कॉन्टैक्ट में ही नहीं थे, डायरेक्ट कॉन्टैक्ट में नहीं थे. सेकेंडली, what has been the general pattern of relationship between these steppe hordes and the Chinese civilization? कैसा रिलेशनशिप रहा है जनरली स्पीकिंग? फ्रेंडली और हॉस्टाइल? एक्सट्रीमली हॉस्टाइल. जब यहाँ पे सब यूनाइट हो जाते हैं तो चाइना की वॉट लग जाती है, और जब चाइना स्ट्रांग रहता है तो इनको ये पुश अवे करता है. ठीक है, so that has been the general pattern. So on the political front also, it was not possible for the Chinese to have engaged the steppe grasslands in a positive manner. कई बार करने की कोशिश करी गई. फॉर एग्जाम्पल कुछ जो फ्रंटियर ट्राइब्स थी चाइनीज सिविलाइजेशन की, उनको ऑलमोस्ट एज गेट कीपर्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करने के लिए कोशिश करी चाइना ने, कि बाकी जो टर्क्स हैं, बाकी जो ट्राइब्समैन हैं, उनसे प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए वी शुड हैव आवर ओन ट्राइबल गेट कीपर्स, राइट? बट ऑलवेज व्हाट हैपेंड वाज कि ट्राइबल अल्टीमेटली एक दूसरे से हाथ मिला लेते थे और दोनों मिल करके चाइना को इन्वेड करते थे. ठीक है, तो कन्वेंशनल विजडम क्या था कि दी फॉर द चाइनीज पीपल द स्टेप हर्ड्समैन, ट्राइब्समैन, दे आर एन एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट. उनको एट अ डिस्टेंस रखो, उनको सबड्यूड रखो, उनको एम्पावर मत करो. ठीक है, बिकॉज दे कुड नॉट हैव बीन इजिली इनकॉर्पोरेटेड इनटू द सोसाइटी. एक आध बार हुआ भी है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल द जिन एम्पायर, द जर्चिन एम्पायर एटसेट्रा. बट व्हाट हैपेंड, as soon as the Mongol threat emerged during the early 13th century, जिन, जर्चिन, ये सब मंगोल एम्पायर के साथ इंटीग्रेट कर लिए गए. चिंगिस खान वाज अ मास्टर टैक्टिशियन एंड अ डिप्लोमैट इन दैट रिगार्ड, राइट? एंड दोनों ने किसको अटैक किया? साउथ चाइना, सोंग एम्पायर, नॉर्थ चाइना, जिन एम्पायर, और दोनों को एक्यूमुलेट भी कर लिया. ठीक है, सो दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई it was not possible for the Chinese to have incorporated the Turks into their own empire. Secondly, इस्लामिक कैलिफेट एक्सपैंड हो चुका था, राइट? तो इस पूरे रीजन में कैलिफेट फैला हुआ था. चाइना, historically speaking, has been what? A nation of soldiers or a nation of traders. नेशन ऑफ ट्रेडर्स, जैसे मंगोल को बोलेंगे नेशन ऑफ सोल्जर्स, चाइनीज को नेशन ऑफ ट्रेडर्स. Very lucrative trade routes existed connecting China to the rest of the known world. And with the consolidation of the Islamic Caliphate from the 8th and 9th century onwards, the trade which had dwindled over the early medieval period, 5th 6th century के बाद से जो trade suppress हो गया था, that was suddenly revived. ठीक है. So it was in the interest of both the Chinese civilization as well as the Islamic Caliphate to keep maintain friendly relations with each other. ठीक है. So that is why the Turks provided security to these frontiers, right? And that is why China के लिए they were tolerable. फिर China, even after the establishment of the Islamic Caliphate, even after the Persianization of the Turks, even after the establishment of the Turkish sultanates, they had continued to be threatened by tribal formations on their own frontier. ठीक. तो इनके लिए जो ट्राइबल्स हैं यहाँ पे, they represent an enemy, right? The Islamic Caliphate settled societies, they also view the tribals in the same light. ये menace है हमारे लिए, security threat है, they can derail trade, they can sack cities, right? So they also saw them as enemies. तो अब नेचुरल अलायंस किसके किसके बीच में इमर्ज होगा? बिटवीन द सेटल्ड सोसाइटीज, चाइना एंड द इस्लामिक वर्ल्ड. अगेंस्ट whom? अगेंस्ट द ट्राइबल्स, राइट? एंड बाय द 10th century, Turks were no longer tribals. They were well integrated into the Islamic Caliphate. They were well integrated into the power structure. They were living in large cities. Pastoralism वगैरह सब छोड़ चुके थे. They had started taking up agriculture. They had started running the state machinery. तो वो जो step gene होता है, that takes 1 or 2 generations to be wiped clean, to be erased from the memory. Settled people हो गए थे अब, right? So that is why by the time that the Turks had an opportunity to come into contact with the Chinese civilization, उनके लिए उतने ज्यादा lucrative नहीं रह गए थे, उतने ज्यादा attractive नहीं रह गए थे. They did not have that X factor which made them so attractive to the Islamic Caliphate. ठीक है. वो जो step horseman वाला पावर होता है, वो इनके पास अब नहीं रह गया था. ठीक. So that is why it was not possible. Clear? जो वेस्टर्न चाइनीज पीपल है, हाँ, वीगुर है, हाँ. तो देयर अ ग्रुप ऑफ टर्कमेन ट्राइब्स. टर्कमेन मतलब टर्किश डिराइव, टर्किश एडजेसेंट. ठीक है. तो चाइना में majority ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन एक रेशियल एंड एथनिक ग्रुप है, दैट इज नोन एज दी हान चाइनीज. ठीक है. उसको बिलोंग करते हैं. मोर देन 95% ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन ऑफ चाइना इज हान चाइनीज. कुछ कुछ छोटी छोटी एथनिक एंड रेशियल माइनॉरिटीज हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल दी वीगर्स कहां पे रहते हैं? चाइना के इस वाले रीजन में रहते हैं, राइट? नोन एज दी शिंकियांग प्रोविंस. एंड ये रीजन किसके एडजेसेंट है? जो तियानशान और अल्टाई माउंटेन्स के बीच में पास है ना, दैट कनेक्ट्स चाइना टू सेंट्रल एशिया. ठीक है. एंड सेंट्रल एशिया में इवन नाउ देयर आर सेवरल टर्किक ट्राइब्स. ठीक है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल तुर्कमेनिस्तान में, काजाकिस्तान में, ताजिकिस्तान में, उज्बेकिस्तान में, तो उस रीजन के एडजेसेंट है ये. तो नेचुरली यहाँ पे कई सारे टर्किश डिसेंट के पीपल रहते हैं, टर्किक पीपल रहते हैं, टर्कमेन पीपल रहते हैं. ठीक है. तो दैट इज देयर एथनिक मेकअप, नोन लोकली एज दी वीगर्स. majority of them are Muslims, and China cannot tolerate them because having a strong communal identity is very very dangerous for the common national Chinese identity. तो चाइना में किसी भी religious community को एक strong identity maintain करने देना, that could threaten the entire fabric of the nation itself. तो माओ ने कुछ इवल्स डिक्लेयर किए थे मॉडर्न सोसाइटीज के लिए, एंड रिलीजन वाज वन ऑफ देम. So he cracked down on Christianity, he cracked down on Buddhism, he also cracked down on Islam. ठीक है, तो चाइना का जो कम्युनिस्ट रेवोल्यूशन हुआ था, that was characteristically atheist in nature. He wanted to destroy all churches, monasteries and mosques, right? इसीलिए यहाँ पर आपने देखा होगा कि बहुत ज्यादा रिपोर्ट्स तो आती नहीं है, लेकिन वीगुर मुस्लिम्स आर बीइंग परसिक्यूटेड बाय द चाइनीज अथॉरिटीज। तो बड़े बड़े कॉन्सेंट्रेशन कैंप्स लगाए हुए हैं, दे कॉल देम बाय द इनॉक्यूअस नेम ऑफ री एजुकेशन कैंप्स, और वहां पे जाकर के इनका सॉफ्टवेयर अपडेट कर रहे हैं। व्हाट आर दे ट्राइंग टू डू टू दी वीगुर मुस्लिम्स? दे आर ट्राइंग टू इरेज द कल्चरल मेमोरी दैट दे हैव। ठीक है, तो वहां पे जाकर के जो बड़बोले लोग होते होंगे उनको तो एलिमिनेट कर दिया जाता है, जो मोर डोसाइल पीपल हैं दे आर बीइंग गिवन सम पॉजिटिव रीइंफोर्समेंट to give up their distinct religious identity, get incorporated into the mainstream Chinese identity. That is what is being done over there. In any case, coming back to the discussion that we were having, यहाँ पे क्या हुआ? From the later half of the 10th century onwards, Ghaznavid sultans began invading North India, including Alaptgin, Subuktigin, and most famously महमूद ऑफ गजनी। अब हमें क्या जानना है? Why were they invading and what was the impact of these early invasions? ठीक है, तो बताओ क्यों इन्वेड कर रहे थे? We have discussed this earlier also, ancient में, early medieval में, when we were talking about the Rajputs. Why were they invading India? What were they interested in? Did they want to conquer and rule Indians? They wanted to plunder the temple wealth of India. ठीक है, so that was the primary objective. क्या? Plunder. And why were they interested in Indian wealth, temple wealth? क्यों चाहिए था इतना ज्यादा पैसा इनको? Because on their western frontiers they were facing some tough challenges. They were in a conflict for territorial regional supremacy, ठीक है, with the Iranians. तो Iranians का गजनविद के साथ पंगा चल रहा था, दोनों के बीच में लड़ाई हो रही थी। अब जंग लड़ने के लिए लोग चाहिए होते हैं, बट मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली खूब सारा पैसा चाहिए होता है। दी लोकल रिसोर्सेज ऑफ अफगानिस्तान क्वाइट मीगर, राइट, तो जमीन वहां की बहुत प्रोडक्टिव नहीं है, जो पॉपुलेशन है वो बहुत ज्यादा नहीं है, जो लोकल ट्रेड है कोई बहुत ज्यादा नहीं होता है, राइट, एंड दैट इज व्हाई प्लंडर वाज द आंसर। इन दिस सिनेरियो certain conditions in India also made it an attractive target. क्या चल रहा था हिंदुस्तान में उस समय? राजपूत पीरियड characterized by feudalism, fragmentation, internal weakness, disorganization, disunity, internal conflict, concentration of wealth in large poorly defended temples, right? सोशल कोहेजन था नहीं, कोई नेशनल आइडेंटिटी नहीं था इंडियंस का उस समय, तो इंडिया वाज एन इजी टारगेट फॉर देम। एंड द टर्क्स विद देयर स्ट्रॉन्ग एथनिक एंड रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी, दे वर मोर यूनिफाइड. They had also honed, perfected their capability as a war machine through a process of a continuous warfare over the previous 3 centuries against settled societies. तो उनको बहुत अच्छे से पता था कि किले कैसे तोड़ने हैं, कैसे इन्वेजन प्लान करने हैं, कैसे अपने ट्रूप्स को मोबिलाइज करना है, लॉजिस्टिक्स कैसे ऑर्गेनाइज करना है, राइट, एंड दैट इज व्हाट मेड इंडिया एक्सट्रीमली वल्नरेबल, राइट. एंड फाइनल फैक्टर क्या था भाई? लोगों को आप अगर बोलोगे कि हमें जाना है दूसरे देश लूट मचाने के लिए, तो शरीफ लोग आएंगे? विल यू गेट सपोर्ट? नहीं मिलेगा, राइट. तो हाउ टू गेट द सपोर्ट ऑफ द जनरल पॉपुलेशन? हाउ टू मोबिलाइज देम? हाउ टू कन्विंस यंग मेन टू टेक अप आर्म्स to invade an unknown faraway land simply for looting? बोलो कि ऊपर वाले का पैगाम है, ठीक है, बोलो कि दिस हैज बीन ऑर्डेन्ड बाय गॉड, डूइंग दिस इज अ सर्विस टू गॉड, और जो साथ में नहीं आएगा दे आर अगेंस्ट गॉड, राइट? So that is how you can motivate the people to join you. So this organized plunder rested upon the pillar of Islamic ideology. ठीक है? Now, was it their real intention to spread Islam to India during this phase? नहीं. अगर यही intention होता तो they should have left some people behind. They should have brought some regions of India under their direct control. They should have established some mosques, कुछ educational institutions establish करते. Did these early invaders do any of these things? नहीं. So Islamic ideology was not the, or spread of Islamic ideology, spread of Islam was not the real motive. Rather, it was a token for legitimacy, for gaining legitimacy. So it was mostly tokenism, right? But while these early Turkish invaders did not want to actually spread Islam in India, they were not averse to the idea of punishing non-believers, of persecuting non-believers, right? And this also tied very neatly into their religious ideology. Most of Indian wealth during the early medieval period कहाँ पे stored था? Temples. What are temples, or what were temples? Primarily a religious place, right? But also a symbol of authority, a symbol of power for the local ruler, source of his legitimacy. So by attacking the temples, कई सारे ऑब्जेक्टिव्स फुलफिल हो सकते थे. आपको पैसा मिल सकता था वहां से. You could demoralize the local population to further reducing the possibility of resistance. You could delegitimize the local ruler. The local ruler would have difficulty in mobilizing his people to support him against you, making your path much easier. And by destroying temples, you could gain legitimacy in the eyes of your own followers. ठीक है कि हम वहां पे गए, we destroyed temples, see what good Muslims we are, right? That is the idea over here. So mainly plunder करने के लिए आए थे, but the pillar that this plunder rested upon was Islamic ideology. But this support for Islamic ideology was not real. It was only an apparition, right? It was largely tokenism and a struggle for an attempt to gain greater legitimacy. Clear? Write down factors behind early Turkish invasions. The Ghaznavid Sultanate was a rising power. And wanted to establish its supremacy across the whole of Central Asia. Full stop. For this, it needed to overcome caliphate forces and governors on its frontiers. And governors on its frontiers. So stop. Next point. This struggle for regional supremacy, this struggle for regional supremacy prompted the Turks to look eastwards, towards India, look eastwards towards India. Full stop. Next point. Their primary objective was to fund their continuous wars by plundering the temple wealth of India. By plundering the temple wealth of India. By plundering the temple wealth of India. Full stop. अगला पॉइंट लिखो. At this point of time, comma, North Indian polity was heavily fragmented, especially after the decline of the Gurjar Pratihar Empire. Next point. A number of small kingdoms had emerged who were constantly fighting. A number of small kingdoms had emerged who were constantly fighting each other for regional supremacy. Next point. Feudalism and constant warfare resulted in economic and military weakness. Next point. The extremely hostile political relations and inward looking attitude of Indians prevented the possibility of any alliance against a common foreign threat. Possibility of any alliance prevented the possibility of any alliance against a common foreign threat. Stop. Next point. In contrast to the political, military, and economic weakness of the state, in contrast to the political, military, and economic weakness of the state, comma, temples had emerged as huge sinks of wealth, as huge sinks of wealth. Next point. Islamic traders and travelers had spread the tail of the fabulous riches, had spread tales of the fabulous riches, tales of the fabulous riches, TALS, tales of the fabulous riches of Indian temples in their homelands, Next point. As such, the poorly defended Indian temples appeared as juicy targets for the Ghaznavid sultans. Juicy targets for the Ghaznavid sultans. Full stop. Next point. The Ghaznavid rulers also capitalized upon the intense militancy of the young Islamic faith, Next point. Their long and dangerous campaigns were promoted as a means to serve God, and ordinary Muslim subjects and soldiers were convinced that destroying temples and punishing non-believers was their religious duty. Next point. Or sub point. This attempt to gain legitimacy is amply demonstrated by the title Buth Shikan adopted by Mahmud of Ghazni. बुत का मतलब idol and shikan is to break. तो बुत शिकन क्या हुआ? Breaker of idols, idol breaker. ठीक है. So the Sultan called himself, he adopted the title of Buth Shikan. Why? To convince his people and his soldiers that he was a Pakka Muslim. He wanted to punish non-believers. He wanted to break all idols, as idolatry is prohibited within Islam. Okay? Is this clear? Next main point likho. However, upon closer observation, it appears that these early invaders had no intention of spreading Islam or expanding their empire to India. Subpoint. They constructed no monuments, mosques, or schools. Next subpoint. They left behind no scholars, administrators, or artists. Next subpoint. Their invasions resembled lightning strikes. And they disappeared as quickly as they arrived. सब पॉइंट. They created no permanent institutions or infrastructure in India. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. Therefore, plundering Indian temple wealth was their only objective. Was their only objective. ठीक है. Next we have to look at the impact. अभी एक फैक्टर्स लिखे हैं ना हमने, अब इम्पैक्ट नेक्स्ट सब हेडिंग. तो बताइए क्या इम्पैक्ट हुआ इसका. लार्ज स्केल डेथ एंड डिस्ट्रक्शन, और did it have any lasting impact on the people? प्रैक्टिकल सेंस में या साइकोलॉजिकल सेंस. प्रैक्टिकल सेंस में तो लास्टिंग इम्पैक्ट नहीं हुआ. The people of India were able to rebuild, but in a psychological sense what happened? The cultural memory of repeated Islamic invasions remained, and this poisoned the future relationship between Hindus and Muslims. Okay? So later on, when the Turkish presence was permanently established in the subcontinent after the victories of Muhammad Ghori and his followers, उसके बाद easy acceptance नहीं मिला उनको. ठीक है. The Indian society remained horizontally divided into two. Hindu society separate from Muslim society. तो इंटीग्रेशन होने में बहुत ज्यादा टाइम एंड एफर्ट लगा उसकी वजह से. ठीक है. तो प्रैक्टिकल सेंस में तो मेजर कोई चेंज नहीं आया, बट साइकोलॉजिकल सेंस में इट क्रिएटेड द फाउंडेशंस फॉर द फ्यूचर फ्रैक्चर्ड रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द टू मेजर रिलीजियस कम्युनिटीज ऑफ इंडिया, हिंदूज एंड मुस्लिम्स. ठीक है. कोई और इम्पैक्ट और कुछ. अरे इंडिया के बारे में इस्लामिक वर्ल्ड में इंफॉर्मेशन अब ज्यादा होगी या कम होगी? अब ज्यादा हो जाएगी, राइट. एंड दिस वाज स्पेशली ड्यू टू द एफर्ट्स ऑफ विच स्कॉलर? महमूद गजनी के टाइम में आया था, अल बरूनी. वी हैव ऑलरेडी टॉक्ड अबाउट हिम. अल बरूनी, डिड ही हैव एनी इम्पैक्ट ऑन इंडिया एंड इंडियंस आल्सो? मेजर इम्पैक्ट. इम्पैक्ट क्या हुआ? He was the first true historian to write in India about Indians, and with the permanent establishment of Islamic rule in North India, historiography became the norm in all the royal courts. So that is where Al-Biruni needs to be given credit. Okay? Al-Biruni also increased awareness of India in the Islamic world and may have provided in some measure the foundations of future rule in India. It helped the Muslim rulers and scholars understand Indians better in the future. ठीक है. तो ये इसका इम्पैक्ट होगा. क्लियर? लिख लें. उनको बेटर नॉलेज था कि कैसे इन्वेड करना है. वी कैन नॉट मेक दैट आर्ग्यूमेंट, क्योंकि ऑल ऑफ महमूद गजनीज इन्वेजन्स इनटू इंडिया वर सक्सेसफुल. ठीक है, कभी भी डिफीट का सामना नहीं करना पड़ा. बट मोहम्मद घोरी को इनिशियल फेज में हारा था वो, राइट, बार बार हारा था इनफैक्ट, बट ही परसिस्टेड. वी कैन नॉट मेक दैट आर्ग्यूमेंट दैट द लेटर इन्वेडर्स वर बेटर इन्फॉर्म्ड. So write down impact. The Ghaznavid invasions, of India resulted in large scale death and destruction. Next point. Several temples were destroyed and the local population was massacred. Next point. The loss of material wealth was insignificant as compared to the loss of cultural wealth. ठीक है, because temples were not simply religious centers, they were also centers for cultural excellence, they were also centers of administration, centers of commerce. तो एक टेम्पल को डिस्ट्रॉय करने से यहाँ इन सब में भी लॉस होगा. ठीक है, तो पैसे का नुकसान हुआ वो तो चल जाएगा, वो तो उसकी भरपाई हो जाएगी, बट लॉस ऑफ कल्चर इज इररिपेयरेबल एंड दैट इज व्हाट हैपेंड. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. These invasions did not create a long lasting political effect. Full stop. The Rajputs retained power. And life largely went back to normal. Once the early invasions ended. Full stop. Sub point. However, the future relationship between Hindus and Muslims was permanently damaged. ठीक है, नाउ एक इसका पॉलिटिकल इम्पैक्ट जरूर हुआ जिसकी वजह से दिस लेटर इन्वेडर्स के लिए काम थोड़ा आसान हो गया, राइट, एंड दैट वाज दैट जो नॉर्थ वेस्टर्न फ्रंटियर है दैट नाउ went away from the control of Indians. At the time of Mahmud of Ghazni, in the region of northern Punjab, southeastern Afghanistan, there used to be a Hindu dynasty known as the Shahi dynasty. Rajput dynasty. In the year 1000, the Shahi ruler Jaipal was defeated by Mahmud of Ghazni, after which he committed self-immolation. The Shahi kingdom collapsed and the region of northern Punjab and southern Afghanistan came under the control of the Ghaznavids. So later it would be much easier to mount invasions into India क्योंकि जो natural frontier था that was no longer secure. ठीक है, so write down. Next main point. The Ghaznavid invasions permanently weakened the security of North India. The security of North India by breaching the natural frontier of the Hindu Kush. The natural frontier of the Hindu Kush. The natural frontier of the Hindu Kush with their victory over the Shahi rulers. Full stop. Southeastern Afghanistan and northern Punjab came under Turkish occupation. Making it easier, came under Turkish occupation, making it easier to plan future invasions. This was in fact Mahmud of Ghazni's first victory against a Rajput ruler. Okay? And after this, he was able to organize at least 16 more invasions into the subcontinent. Okay? So total लगभग 17 बार उसने invade किया, and the reason for his ability to organize invasions was because he had breached the natural frontier. Hindu Kush mountains were under his control, so it was very easy to pass this barrier without any challenge. जितने भी संकरे mountain passes हैं, they were under Turkish control. There was no Indian force to defend these things, right? And once they enter the plains, वहां पे तो कोई दिक्कत होगी ही नहीं. ठीक. अच्छा, next main point लिखो. The Ghaznavid invasions also broadened knowledge of India and Indians in the Islamic world. Primarily due to the writings of Al-Biruni. full stop. Sub point. The Kitabul Hind also served as a guide to future Muslim rulers and scholars in India. In India. Rulers and scholars in India. ठीक है, ये हो गया फर्स्ट वेव ऑफ टर्किश इन्वेजन. Mahmud of Ghazni died in the year 1030, after which the Ghaznavid Empire collapsed. And with the collapse of the Ghaznavid Empire, further invasions into India stopped happening. उसके बाद नहीं हुए लगभग 150 साल के लिए. ठीक है. Now the second wave of Turkish invasions took place under Muhammad Ghori, also known as Shahabuddin Ghori, also known as Muhammad bin Sam. Reign 1173 to 1206. Now, after the decline of the Ghaznavid Empire, the region that it controlled experienced a lengthy period of political chaos. Okay? A number of local governors were competing against each other for establishing initially local supremacy and then regional supremacy. Ultimately, by the mid 12th century, two powerful empires had emerged from the grave of the Ghaznavid Empire. One was the Ghurid Empire and the other was the Khwarezmian Empire or Khwarezm Empire. Okay? Now, if you were to look at the map, तो ये अगर गजनविद एम्पायर है तो घूरिद एम्पायर रफली इस रीजन में और ख्वारिज्मी एम्पायर रफली इस रीजन में. ठीक है, तो इट कवर्ड पार्ट्स ऑफ सेंट्रल एशिया एंड ईरान. घूरिद एम्पायर वाज लोकेटेड इन पार्ट्स ऑफ सेंट्रल एशिया एंड अफगानिस्तान प्राइमरली. एंड अब इन दोनों के बीच में रिलेशनशिप कैसा होगा? फ्रेंडली और हॉस्टाइल? एक्सट्रीमली हॉस्टाइल, राइट. दे वर कंपीटिंग अगेंस्ट ईच अदर फॉर टोटल सुप्रीमेसी. इनके बीच में था कंपटीशन. मोहम्मद घोरी took a leaf out of his Ghaznavid predecessors books, right? जैसे गजनविद predecessors ने इंडिया की तरफ देखा था, he also started looking towards India because once again political situation यहाँ पे change हुई नहीं थी, social situation change हुई नहीं थी, economic situation नहीं change हुई थी, the country was poorly defended, easily invadable, the temples were extremely attractive as very juicy targets, they were extremely wealthy and poorly defended, society was fractured, कोई social cohesion नहीं था, political and military weakness था, the Rajput kingdoms were small in size, infighting बहुत ज़्यादा था, feudal social setup था, right? So all the conditions were right for the revival of Turkish invasions. Right? So once again, the Ghurid Empire, led by Muhammad Ghori, began invading India. His first attempt came in 1178. पहले इसने क्या सोचा, देखो पंजाब वाली रीजन में तो गजनविद्स के अभी भी गवर्नर्स बैठे हुए हैं, रेमिनेंट्स हैं, राइट, एंड दे आर गोइंग टू बी रिलेटिवली डिफिकल्ट टू ओवरकम. So let me first travel to Balochistan and then through the Gomal Pass and then Bolan Pass reach Gujarat and Gujarat को अटैक करेंगे through Sindh. ठीक. However, this first attempt was unsuccessful. He was defeated by the Solanki ruler भीमा दी सेकेंड. राइट, गुजरात में सोलंकीज का रूल था. नाउ ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ महमूद गजनी गुजरात में कोई इन्वेजन्स हुए? यस, सोमनाथ वाज सैक्ड एंड उस समय भी एक रूलर था, उसका नाम था भीमा. राइट, हिज नेम वाज भीमा दी फर्स्ट. इंस्टेड ऑफ फाइटिंग महमूद ऑफ गजनी ही हैड सिंपली रन अवे. और जब गजनी चला गया वापस तो ये वापस आ गया. ठीक है. In contrast, Bhima II met the armies of Mahmud Ghori in Sindh itself. तो अपने टेरिटरी में आने भी नहीं दिया, जो कोर रीजन है वहां तक पहुंचने भी नहीं दिया. He was defeated. तो महमूद घोरी को ये समझ में आ गया कि यहाँ पे तो दाल नहीं गलने वाली है. गुजरात is too strong and it is not going to give me a good launch pad to invade the rest of the subcontinent. ठीक है, खाली हाथ यहां से लौटना पड़ेगा बार बार. एंड दस क्या ऑप्शन बचता है उसके पास? केवल यही बचता है कि थ्रू पंजाब राजस्थान में अटैक करो. ठीक है, एंड फ्रॉम राजस्थान इनटू द रेस्ट ऑफ द नॉर्थ इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट. ठीक. एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, हाउएवर, अमंग द राजपूत्स one leader had emerged and he had been able to overcome several of his competitors and had incorporated them into a major Rajput alliance. किस रूलर की बात कर रहे हैं? पृथ्वीराज चौहान दी थर्ड. So he had fought against the Parmars of Malwa also. He had defeated the Gahadwals of Kannauj also. He had defeated both of these powers and he was trying to overcome Bhima II of Gujarat. Right? However, Bhima II ने पृथ्वीराज चौहान को भी हरा दिया. पृथ्वीराज चौहान को क्या समझ में आ गया कि इधर एक्सपेंशन तो नहीं हो सकता. दिस रीजन इज ऑलरेडी अंडर माई कंट्रोल. तो अब एक्सपैंड किधर करना है? इधर करना है. राइट. एक साइड घोरी इधर एक्सपैंड करने की सोच रहा है, एक साइड पृथ्वीराज चौहान इधर एक्सपैंड करने की सोच रहा है. राइट. तो फाइनली होगा क्या? दोनों के बीच में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट होगा. एंड दिस इज हाउ दिस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट टुक प्लेस. दो फेमस बैटल्स हुए. दोनों कहां पे हुए? राइन. कहां पे है? हरियाणा. ठीक है. कब? 1191, 1192. फर्स्ट बैटल ऑफ तरेन में क्या हुआ? कौन जीता कौन हारा? पृथ्वीराज चौहान emerged victorious. However, Ghori escaped, regrouped and invaded the very next year. In 1192, Prithviraj Chauhan was defeated and later he was executed. Okay? Ghori emerged victorious. Clear? With this victory, the entire region of Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana and Delhi came under Turkish control. Clear? However, there were still some strong powers that had to be overcome. The strongest remaining power in North India was Jayachandra, the ruler of Kannauj. The battle took place in 1194 at a place called Chandavar, right? And क्या हुआ इस बैटल में? A resounding victory for the Turks. Jayachandra was also killed, and with this, the floodgates to the rest of the Gangetic Valley were thrown open for Turkish invaders. Further eastward invasion was undertaken by one of the commanders of Muhammad Ghori. क्या नाम था? बख्तियार खिलजी. Within a matter of a few months, he extended the Turkish conquests in India from Kannauj right up to Bengal. Okay? So he brought the whole of eastern UP, undivided Bihar and undivided Bengal under Turkish rule. Okay? And with this, the Turkish conquest of North India was complete. However, Muhammad Ghori was preoccupied with other matters. He did not have the time or the opportunity to establish a proper government and administrative setup in India, and even had to devolve the administrative duties in his own kingdom, in Ghur also. Why? Because he had to return to the western front. Khwarezmian Empire के साथ war दोबारा शुरू हो गया था, and he had to concentrate on that. ठीक है? तो मोहम्मद घोरी retreated to the Khwarezmian front and gave the responsibility of administration to 3 of his slave governors. कौन कौन? Tajuddin Yildiz in Afghanistan, Nasiruddin Kubacha in Sindh, and Kutubuddin Aibak in Punjab and North India. Bihar and Bengal remained under military occupation by Bakhtiyar Khilji. Okay? Now, for the remainder of his life, Muhammad Ghori continued to tour his extensive empire. कभी इंडिया में रहता था, कभी अफगानिस्तान में रहता था. This he did till his death in 1206, when he was assassinated by a rival tribesman, Khokhar tribesman in Punjab while he was in India. Okay? So at the time of his death, these three governors were governing over different parts of his empire. He himself did not have any legitimate son, and तो इसका कोई successor नहीं था. And what is going to happen now? Each of these governors are going to declare independence, and they are going to declare themselves to be the rightful sultans. The empire is thus going to split into three, and इनके बीच में अब क्या हो जाएगा? कंपटीशन शुरू हो जाएगा, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट शुरू हो जाएगा. ठीक है. Now the motivations for both the first and second wave of Turkish invasions are rather the same. In both occasions, the Turks were interested in plundering India's temple wealth to fund their own wars on the western front in Central and Western Asia. But there were some important differences between the first and second wave of invasions. क्या major difference है? जब पहली बार इन्वेड किया था, they did not want to establish their rule, right? अब की बार किया है तो they want to establish their rule. They have brought North India under their own dominion. They have created the apparatus for power. Military occupation यहाँ पे permanent है, right? And अब इंडिया में some Islamic culture, Turkish culture, Persian culture भी introduce करेंगे, right? Some mosques are going to be constructed. Governors have been left behind. Scholars will be brought. Conversions are going to be undertaken. Some you can say cultural activities are also going to be promoted in order to give an Islamic identity to this new region of conquest. ठीक है? So that is going to be done. लिख लो इसको. Give the heading Ghurid invasions. Ghurid invasions. Write down. With the decline of the Ghaznavid Empire, Central Asia experienced a lengthy period of political chaos. Full stop. Next point. Turkish invasions into India completely stopped. And the Rajput states were able to revive their power. Next point. Ultimately, two powerful empires emerged in Central Asia. With both seeking to establish their complete supremacy. Full stop. These were These were A and B. The Khwarezmian Empire to the west and Ghurid Empire to the east. B. Ghurid Empire to the east. Full stop. Next main point. Muhammad Ghori who became Sultan in 1173. Once again looked towards Indian temple wealth. To secure power, Indian temple wealth, or to secure victory. Next point. In 1178, he planned an invasion of Gujarat through Balochistan and Sindh, bypassing the Ghaznavid remnants in Punjab, Full stop. Next point. However, Bhima II of Gujarat inflicted a crushing defeat upon him. Full stop. Next point. This forced Ghori to reconsider his strategy and set his eyes on Punjab. Next point. Through a series of conflicts and compromises, Northern Punjab finally came under Ghori's influence by 1190. Full stop. Ghori was finally in a position to use Punjab as a base of operations . in India, as a base of operations in India. Next main point. On the other hand, comma, the Rajput world was also witnessing a remarkable change. Full stop. Subpoint. Prithviraj Chauhan III had successfully united several Rajput clans into a confederacy, and had already defeated both the Parmars of Malwa and the Gahadwals of Kannauj. Next subpoint. However, his ambition was checked. By Bhima the Second. Checked by Bhima the Second, who repelled him from Gujarat. Next subpoint. As such, he set his eyes on the region of Punjab for further expansion. Next point. Next main point. Both he and Ghori were looking to bring the region of Tabarhind, Tabarhind. This was the old name for Bhatinda. Tabarhind under their control. And thus, a conflict was imminent. Next point. Ghori took the initiative. And attacked the Rajput forces. Full stop. Next point. However, he was handily defeated. He was handily defeated in the first battle of the Rain. He was handily defeated in the first battle of the Rain. Within brackets 1191. But he could not be captured. But he could not be captured. Full stop. Next point. Following this, comma, the intense internal rivalry of the Rajputs resulted in the dissolution of their alliance. The dissolution of their alliance. Full stop. Next point. When Prithviraj Chauhan was preparing to fight, the Chauhans and Parmars once again, comma, Ghori invaded unexpectedly, resulting in an easy victory in the second battle of the Rain. Second battle of the Rain. Easy victory in the second battle of the Rain. Okay. Next point. The whole of Punjab and Haryana, and Rajasthan, northern Rajasthan was now under his control. Whole of Punjab, Haryana and northern Rajasthan was now under his control. Full stop. Next point. Next, he overcame the forces of Jayachandra of Kannauj in 1194. Within brackets, Battle of Chandavar. Battle of Chandavar. Next main point. Further Turkish conquests in eastern India were undertaken by Bakhtiyar Khilji, who overran the whole of Bihar and Bengal in a matter of months. Overran the whole of Bihar and Bengal in a matter of months. Next point. With this, the entire northern portion of the subcontinent became part of Ghuri's vast empire. Became part of Ghuri's vast empire. Next point. However, his preoccupation with the Khwarezmian War prevented him from overseeing the administration directly. From overseeing the administration directly. Full stop. Next point. He appointed 3 governors, 1, 2 and 3. Number 1, Tajuddin Yildiz. Tajuddin Yildiz at Ghur. Number 2, Nasiruddin Kubacha. Nasiruddin Kubacha at Multan. And number 3, Kutubuddin Aibak at Lahore. Next point. When Ghori died in 1206, without a legal heir, when Ghori died in 1206 without a legal heir, comma, each of these governors declared themselves to be the rightful Sultan. Full stop. The resulting conflict created the necessary conditions for the emergence of a new sultanate at Delhi independent of Ghur. Independent of Ghur. ठीक है? Next main point. As such, while Ghori shared his desire to plunder Indian temple wealth, his desire to plunder Indian temple wealth with the early Turkish invaders, comma, unlike them, he wanted to establish a permanent presence in India and political expansion, establish a permanent presence in India and political expansion in India was one of his priorities. Next point. The establishment of the Delhi Sultanate was a direct result of Ghori's conquests and it permanently changed the course of Indian history in a major way. ठीक है? समझ में आया? First and second wave of Turkish invasions. Now take down a question. Discuss the factors responsible for Turkish invasions of India under Ghaznavi and Ghori. Full stop. Is it correct to say that the earlier invasions pale in comparison to the significance of the second wave? Question mark. 200 words. क्वेश्चन समझ में आया है? तो दो पार्ट में इसको एड्रेस करना है. फर्स्ट वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट दी फैक्टर्स. पहले तो जो कॉमन फैक्टर्स हैं उसके बारे में बताओगे, फिर उसके बाद जो घुरिद इन्वेजन्स हैं उनके जो अदर फैक्टर्स हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल, डिजायर फॉर पॉलिटिकल एक्सपेंशन टू एस्टैब्लिश अ परमानेंट प्रेजेंस, to spread Islam in India, to bring the material resources of India under the permanent Turkish control. ये सब बताओगे आप. And then you come to the second portion. Is it correct to say that earlier invasion pale in comparison to the significance of the second wave? इसको address करना है. तो ज्यादा significant कौन सा है? First wave of invasion, second wave? Second wave. Why? Because in comparison to the first wave, the second wave of invasions resulted in the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate, permanent Turkish presence, Islamic presence in India. And the second wave created a long lasting set of political, economic, socio-cultural and military impacts. राइट. एंड इसको अब हमें नेक्स्ट डिस्कस करना है. व्हाट वाज द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ टर्किश कॉन्क्वेस्ट इन इंडिया. तो यू विल बी एबल टू एड्रेस द सेकंड पोर्शन ऑफ दिस आंसर बेटर आफ्टर कवरिंग ये वाला. ये हम कल की क्लास में कवर करेंगे. ठीक है. एनी डाउट्स रिगार्डिंग व्हाट वी हैव कवर्ड टुडे? सिंपल स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड है. आई डोंट थिंक ज्यादा डाउट्स होने चाहिए. ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स, एनी डाउट्स? नो? ऑलराइट. चलिए. आई एम first wave is also significant, which also paved the way for the second wave. The first wave did not actually pave the way for the second wave, at least not directly, because after the decline of the Ghaznavid Empire, the Turkish invasions of North India completely stopped. You may say that indirectly it eased the path of Ghori by dissolving the northern frontier, right? Hindu Kush now came under Turkish control. But that also Ghori could recognize only after his failed attempt to invade Gujarat, right? पहले तो उसने उसको utilize करने की कोशिश भी नहीं की. So we cannot say that. And secondly, the kind of political, economic, socio-cultural and military impact the second wave of invasions had is much higher than the first wave of invasions. पहले वेव में कोई permanent political, economic, social, cultural या फिर military impact नहीं हुआ, because these were temporary strikes. There was no permanent association of Indians with the Turks. There was no cultural exchange, no economic exchange. बस थोड़े समय के लिए आते थे, मार काट करते थे, लूट मचाते थे, and then they used to return. And this took place over a period of about 60 to 70 years, right? After that, for the next 150 years, there was virtually no contact between the Indians and the Turks. That is why there was no permanent impact of the first wave. Second wave ka, the case is entirely different. Establishment of Delhi Sultanate took place, right? And left behind a major impact. Okay. All right. Chaliye then. Thank you for your time.